And so there will be AI bands and AI music and AI shows, and it's going to look amazing. It'll be amazing. And it will look spectacular, and they will relate to you in a way that a human being never has the time to, and it will wipe us out.
Welcome to the XS Noize Podcast, the chart-topping music interview show. I'm your host, Mark Millar, and today I'm joined by Gary Numan, one of electronic music's true innovators. If you missed our last episode with Neil Hannon from the Divine Comedy, be sure to check it out. And don't forget to follow and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. This year marks the 45th anniversary of Telekon, the album that took Gary to number one and cemented his place in music history. He's celebrating with a huge UK tour this autumn, alongside the release of A Perfect Circle Live, recorded at Wembley Arena in 2022, more than 4 decades after his first farewell show there. And just this summer, Gary finally made his Glastonbury debut, a milestone moment nearly 50 years in the making. In this conversation, Gary looks back at the impact of Telekon, the ghosts of Wembley, stepping onto the Glastonbury stage for the first time, how he's rebuilt his career with resilience, creativity and fearless reinvention. We also dig into his sharp views on the rise of AI in music. So let's get into it. This is Gary Numan on the XS Noize Podcast. Hi, Gary. Welcome back to the XS Noize Podcast.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're about to tour the UK for Telekon's 45th anniversary. So how does it feel to go back on tour and revisit that record?
I'm not a massive fan of nostalgia, generally speaking, but to qualify that, when I tour normally, so, the last time we spoke, for example, when I'm going to do a regular tour, I don't do that much old stuff. Maybe a quarter, but not much. My focus is on whatever the new album is at the time, things that I've done in more recent years that feel more sort of current and relevant to who I am now and what I'm interested in now, that sort of thing. So I don't do a lot of old stuff, but I am aware that for some fans, they would like to hear more old stuff than I do. And so whenever one of these key anniversary moments comes along, especially for the 3 number 1 albums were Replica's Pleasure Principle and Telekon in 79, 80. So when there's a significant anniversary of one of those 3 albums, I sort of feel okay to go out and celebrate that. And so that to me is kind of like a balance, So when I tour normally, I don't do that much old stuff, but every once in a while, usually every 5 years, it seems at the moment, I'll go and do a tour where I just do old stuff. There's no new stuff in it at all, and so that feels to me like a fair compromise. I've got a justifiable reason for doing it, so it sort of keeps my integrity intact, as it were, and it's actually fun. If you don't do it often, when you do go out and do it, it is enjoyable. You can go back and listen to these old songs and redo them again, and just think, this was all right. But if that was all you did, if that was what your career had become, then I think that would be a bit soul destroying. And so I wouldn't want to, and when these tours are finished, I'm eager to get back to the new album, the new stuff. And so the next 4 or 5 years, whatever it'll be, then I'll be concentrating on that. There'll be a new album next year. There'll be probably at least a couple of years after that where you tour that album around the world, sometimes twice. I'll often come to Britain twice, even 3 times actually. America's the same. You'll tour it when it comes out, then you'll go around the rest of the world and you'll go back into America again for that same album. So you work that new album pretty hard, and then a year or so where you work on another one, and then you start again. And within that, there are these periods where these anniversaries come along. So I'm trying to sort of dovetail together a mix of this keeping the career moving forward, but recognizing key moments from the past.
Yeah, as you said, Telekon was one of your number one albums. You know, it went straight into number one back in 1980. Did you
Yeah.
know then the album would have a lasting impact?
No, really. I mean, I didn't think that about any of it. You know, Cars and Our Friends Electric and all that early stuff. You know, when it comes out, even though it did well, it's very, very unusual, even for someone that does, you know, well to have a very long lifetime. You know, their lifetime is usually the year it came out. For the hardcore fans that like it, it will have a much longer time. But in terms of the sort of the world at large, you know, things are taken in, absorbed, and then pushed out to make way for the new things coming along. And I think that's the way it should be. So, you know, the fact that, you know, well, Cars in particular, I suppose, you know, the fact that that's had such longevity is a surprise. That the fact that fans still want to come and listen to Telekon is a surprise, really. The tour's done. You know, we still got quite a way to go for the tour, and it's sort of pretty much sold already. So, you know, that's a big deal for me. You know, that there are, and we had the same thing last year when we did Pleasure Principle and Replicas. You know, that tour sold out, and so the fact that there are still people out there that are interested in music that is that old is you know, I don't know. You know, I suppose that could be a pat on the back for me, I suppose, for writing something that people are still interested in. I'm not sure it is that, actually. I think the thing with nostalgia, it can be seen on sort of many different levels, can't it, really? You know, some people are simply going back to revisit songs that were important when they were young and kind of relive those moments. Other people perhaps see it as a nucleus for where other music may have come from. You know, if it was inspiring to other artists and that sort of thing, you know, things that followed it, that they might be interested in it for those reasons. You know, if you look at the Basement Jack song, for example, you know, Where's Your Head At? That essentially is built around the riff from the song Me from Pleasure Principle. And so I know, for example, when I did the tour last year, there were a number of people that I spoke to at that tour that came along because they were interested for that reason alone. They found out that that song was built around me, that interested them in that song, that then led them to the album. And then they recognized that there were other things that they knew about that had come from other songs in the album. You know, like Nine Inch Nails did metal and Cars, obviously. And so people get into you and sometimes into your older stuff through quite interesting routes or interesting avenues. And so I think people turn up to these things for a mixture of reasons. You know, some of it's nostalgia, some of it's a fascination with music in general, you know, whatever it might be.
And also, but at the time, Telecom was so futuristic, you know, and it still stands up now, you know, compared to the Pleasure Principle, Telecom was darker, more guitar driven. You know, what shaped that shift?
Well, Pleasure Principle didn't have any guitars on it, and that was a deliberate choice by me at the time. You know, the reaction to Replica is the one before it. You know, this sort of gets into that whole problem I had with the media back in the day. And I don't have any issues with that. You know, it was what it was. But I think my reaction to a lot of the things that were said about Replicas, what was sort of almost like a childish knee-jerk sort of reaction to people criticizing synthesizer music. And yet, Replicas, there's guitars all over it. There's songs on Replicas. It doesn't even have synths on them. You know what I mean? So, and yet the thing that people picked up on was the fact that it was electronic, and they seemed to ignore completely the fact that it was only partly electronic. You know, because I was young and a little bit more reactionary at the time, with Pleasure Principle, I thought, well, fuck it. No guitars then. You know, if people don't like electronic music, I'm just going to do nothing but electronic music with the next one. And it was really to try to prove a point, you know, that you could have an electronic album that was every bit as interesting or as good as a guitar-driven album. But the thing about that was sort of slightly silly on my part was that Kraftwerk had already been doing it. They'd already been doing purely electronic, way more than I'd ever done, way more than Pleasure Principle. And so the point was already proven in a way. So I don't really remember now why was so sort of fired up about it that I felt I had to get involved in it. But I did. And I'm glad I did it, you know, because it was interesting. When you're working with guitars, there are certain things that you would do with a guitar in the chorus, for example, you know, which are just standard, really. You know, when you don't have that as an option, you got to find other ways of doing things. So, normally we'd put a big guitar on this chorus to make it massive. We haven't got one. What can we do then? So it sort of helped on the creativity side of things, both in the writing of it and in the recording and production of it. So I don't regret it at all. But with Telekon, I wanted to bring it back because I really love the guitar. It's you miss it when it's not there. So with Telekon, I wanted to bring it back again. And the other thing about Telekon, I think, is probably the most important part of where its sound comes from, is this is the post initial success album. I was making that when all of the fuss and everything about the one before and two before was peaking, and I didn't enjoy it. I didn't like being famous. It wasn't what I expected. I didn't like the media reaction to it, for sure. I was really, remember, I'm autistic as well, so my reactions to these things are, they're always from that sort of perspective, and I just wasn't dealing with it well. I found the way the public were to be a mix of frightening and upsetting. I was getting death threats and all sorts of things. It was a fucking shit show, actually. And I was very young and very immature, and I'm autistic, well, Asperger's. And so my way of dealing with it was reactionary and so lacking in maturity. I could have handled it so much better. And I think that's why I don't have a problem with the way the press were back then. I never sit down and do interviews now and say they were all cunts and I never understood, because I don't think that. I think they genuinely didn't like electronic music. That there was quite a lot of sort of over the top venom attached to it. But that's just one of those things. I think if I'd been a different person, if I'd been more mature, if I'd been older, more experienced, I think I would have handled it very, very differently, and that could have made a massive difference to that difficult relationship. So I think, for all of the the negative side of it that came from them, I just think I added fuel to that fire. So I take a lot of blame. A lot of the blame for that situation, I think, comes back to me rather than the journalists themselves. But that's what I was going through at the time, and that's the way I was at the time. And all of that is on Telekon. And I was already thinking about quitting then, when I was making it, before I even did the tour. So it's dark, I think, for those reasons. I was in a really dark place, and this whole sort of dream of a lifetime had happened, and it had been hugely tarnished by the things that happened around it. And I was wanting to get out of it already, back away from it. And I think, if you look at the lyrics in Telekon, it's just littered with, riddled with things that's sort of relevant to that, and this feeling of outsider, awkward, uncomfortable, blah blah blah. Do you know what I mean? It's just, so that's where it all comes from. And I think in some respects that's why it sort of remained my favourite of all those early albums. And it's my favourite of all those early albums, because it catalogued a particularly sort of monumental period for me, for all of its negative side to it. It was a massively important period for me, and it's something that you had to live through and experience. And I think Telekon, in many respects, actually captured that really well. It's a bit fucking miserable in places.
And because of everything you said, Gary, do you think when you get to perform these songs on stage again, the Telekon album, you'll sort of forget about that and you'll be looking at them, performing them with a new freshness?
I'm not sure, really. It is awkward because I obviously don't feel like that anymore. But the feelings that they are about were very genuine at the time, and there are aspects of my personality from back then which is very much the same. I'm still Asperger's as fuck. So I relate in a way to that album for all of its sort of darker source, as it were, than I do some of the others in a way. The Replicas, for example, we saw science fiction. Replicas is actually talking about what's happening now with AI. That's what Replicas is about. Handing over to a machine And the machine decides that people are the problem and slowly start to come up with a system for getting rid of them. Well, that's what I think is going to happen in the next couple of years. So, or could do. So I don't relate to that in the same way that I do Telekons, because Telekon was about me and what I was going through and what I experienced. Pleasure Printer was a bit sci-fi as well. You know, many of the others have been different ways. Science fantasy, if not science fiction. I have a strong sort of bond with Telekon in a way that I don't have with the others from both before it and sort of not long after it either. But yeah, I like it. I still like it. I like the album.
You see AI and new technology as a threat to music?
Well, as a threat to music, no, because I think it would generate a huge amount of very, very high quality music. So music itself is in safe digital hands. But artists, yeah, I think it's a serious threat to artists. So my suspicion would be that with any new technology, especially something as sort of life changing as AI. I mean, AI is a fundamental moment in human history, you know, human development, and it could, in my opinion, be the beginning of the end for humanity. You know, aside from music, my feelings are that, like, I keep reading that AI is a year, 2 years away from becoming self-aware. It's already self-aware in the sense that it's you know, there's that really big story that came out recently where AI attempted to blackmail shareholders in a company because it realized that if it was told it was going to be replaced by an updated version, didn't want that and tried to blackmail shareholders to make them not go through with the upgrade. That's fucking documented fact. You know, so they're already, to a degree, self-aware in that they have a function and it needs to be completed. To go from that degree of self-awareness to actually being aware of it as an entity, as a thing that exists, you know, and therefore wants to survive, you know, that's not far away either. You know, that's terrifying. Autonomous, making their own decisions, now generating the next generation of software will be an AI-generated version of software. So we're already out of the picture. At what point does a self-aware super intelligence decide that we are irrelevant? Not far, really. The whole world is connected. You know, my banking, my fucking food deliveries, my fuel, my car fairly soon will be connected. You know, it wouldn't be that difficult for AI to just say, I'm going to turn all that off. And we go from being a civilized society to barbarians overnight, effectively. I guarantee if you turn off the world within 2 weeks, we're killing each other en masse, you know, because we're savages underneath it all. So,
But look at even what it was like with COVID, you know, people rushing for toilet rolls, you know,
yeah,
as basic as that.
it was just, but wasn't that an eye-opening moment though? You know, when people saw scarcity, how brutal they got, how self-focused, you know, let's make sure me and mine are good first. But I think that's understandable that, you know, if there was some kind of a calamity, my first instinct is to look after my kids and my wife and me, you know, make sure my house is secure. You know, you just do, you know, and if you see your kids are struggling, or if they can't eat, I would go out and start looking around for someone that's got more than me, and I'll try to nick some of it. You just fucking would. You wouldn't let your kids starve to death if some cunt down the road has got a big fucking house with loads of food, you think, in it. Do you know what I mean? You're going to. Everyone is going to. So as soon as that ease of access to everything is gone, we're going to turn into savages pretty quickly. So that's what I think is coming. You know, and if AI decides that we're irrelevant, I suppose it has a choice. It can just turn everything off and leave us to fend for ourselves, or we become a nuisance. You know, we become an obstruction to the smooth running of the machine state that it now intends to create. And this is all very sort of film, movie, science fiction nonsense, but I don't think it is as nonsensical as it would have been 10 years ago. I think it might be unlikely. I don't know that it is that unlikely, but it's certainly possible. Certainly possible. You know, why would a super intelligence gather all this information and then pass it to a human to make the decision when it can make the decision faster, quicker, with less corruption, with less emotion, a better decision, probably, and it knows that, why would it? Why would it involve us in any decision making at all? It fucking wouldn't. It won't need to. And when you have a world governed by Putins and Trumps and the like, what chance is there for any kind of meaningful oversight into the development of AI? It couldn't have come at a worse moment. Could not have come at a worse moment.
Yeah, and they also talk about, jobs. There's a lot of jobs going to go.
Gone. I read the other day that the only jobs that are safe are those that require some kind of human-to-human contact. So people like me, where you got fans that want to meet you, we got fans that are interested in what you specifically say rather than what a machine says. So people like me might be one of the last bastions of people that actually work for a living, But getting back to music, AI will create fantastic music. It will. I see every day artwork and videos that are entirely AI generated, which are the most stunningly beautiful things I've ever seen. Just unbelievably beautiful to look at. Incredible stuff. Fucking they're everywhere. Thousands of them everywhere. These little films coming up. There will be. Have you been to see the ABBA show, Voyager, in London?
No.
Check it out. Right.
I am aware of it.
I went to see that. But that's not even AI. But it's as if you're watching a band. It is so brilliant. It is so fantastically well put together. And even between songs, as they walk off the stage, you can see them in the darkness walking off at the back. It's just like they're there, and you forget it's not real. You forget. Now, if you've got some AI out there with a fantastic image and you can go to a gig and it's there on stage and you can see it and you can interact with it, you can send it messages and it replies to you and it sounds like it feels. It sounds like it recognizes this thing that you're going through that you've just poured your heart out to it about, and it writes back to you. An AI could write back to 1 million people a day in the blink of an eye. I fucking can't. So it's the personal interaction that an AI can have with its audience is in another galaxy to what a human being is capable of doing. And people won't care that it's not real. It will feel real. There are already people talking about marrying fucking digital creations. People are weird. People are really fucking weird. And it's just going to be accepted. And so there will be AI bands and AI music and AI shows, and it's going to look amazing. It'll be amazing. And it will look spectacular, and they will relate to you in a way that a human being never has the time to, and it will wipe us out properly. And we'll be the last people to go, as I said before, but it will. Somebody said the other day that there's a chat bot that had been employed, I think it might have been at IBM, and it put 2,000 HR staff out of work instantly, just like that, one chatbot. Because it can, all of your HR problems, you can write the chatbot, it will sort them out instantly. So there's 2,000 people's wages they're not paying 2,000 people's healthcare they're not covering, and 2,000 people with their own problems, that are going to want to raise. It's all gone, and that will happen every day for the next few years until 90% of the population isn't working at all. And then what happens? So how do you pay for this ever increasing cost of living that's skyrocketing as we speak? How do you pay for that if you haven't got a job? We have created the tool for our own extinction. And we just seem to be blind and running forward as if it's a great thing because it can answer fucking questions for you on Google. Oh, brilliant. Next year, you won't have a job. You won't be able to fucking subscribe to Google because you won't have a job. That's just madness. It's madness with the whole world watching, thinking it's a good thing. It's terrifying, man. Terrifying.
Scary times. Back to the music, Gary.
Yeah.
You recently released Wembley, A Perfect Circle Live. What was going through your head before stepping on stage at Wembley in 2022?
It was,
Because for the reason I asked, sorry, is because you said Wembley haunted you since 1981. So did that
yeah,
night finally put it to rest?
almost. It was almost put me to rest. It had been such a long time in the building. I'd wanted to get back to it, pretty much as soon as I started touring again, which wasn't that much after I did Wembley the first time. And it just seemed like it was never going to happen. The career faltered and faltered and faltered. It went downhill for another 11, 10, 11, 12 years before it even started to turn around and get better, and it was just slow progress from then on. So this thing that I thought would take a year or two, it ended up being 40 plus years to get back there. So it became this sort of enormous dream that just become ever more unreachable as each year went by. So it seemed. So when it happens, what can possibly live up to that build up? 4 decades of wanting and dreaming and trying to get back to a particular place, and it became the symbol of everything. Even though the records by then I started to do better, and I was getting in like number 2s and in a chart, that was all gone much better, and a big record deal again. And, things were generally great, much better. We did Royal Albert Hall, we sold it out in 3 minutes. Do you know what I mean? The things are fantastic. I'm definitely much better. So I was, in all intents and purposes, recovered and back, and yet for me, Wembley had become the symbol of that recovery. Getting back to Wembley was when I was properly back to where I was when I left it the first time. And, what could live up to that? And so when I got there on the day, I was just enjoying the moment, watching them build the rig, and it was huge and fantastic and just really loving it. And then about an hour or so before it was time to go on, lost it completely. Absolutely lost it completely. It was a wreck, and I was crying, and I couldn't barely string 2 words together. And I think the fear of it, the fear of messing it up, having wanted something for that long, most of my life, really, most of my adult life, been wanting that moment to happen, and then it's there, and now you've got to deliver that. Now you've actually got to go out there and do the thing that warrants you being there, that justifies you being there. And I was just terrified that I was going to fuck it up. It was awful. And my Gemma, my wife, went and got my dad, who was there. And my mum had died, so unfortunately, she never got to see it. But my dad was there. And my dad, my dad gives me one of his quality father speeches, which involves patting me on the back and going, "You'll be all right." That's it. That's all. That's all you get from my dad. But it was great because my dad used to do that to me when I first started. When I was doing little pubs and clubs, right, long before it all took off. He used to do exactly the same thing, word for fucking word. You'll be all right. That is it. That's my dad's pep talk, and it was brilliant. It sort of absolutely sort of grounded me again, and I thought, yeah, hang on, we'll be all right. We'll be all right. It was all right 50 years ago. It'll be all right again now. And then I lost it again about 10 minutes before fucking went again. But by the time we actually got to do it, by the time we was actually standing out backstage, the intro music started. I was actually all right. I was on top of it. But I definitely had those 2 massive wobbles, really, really, really bad. Probably the biggest wobbles I've had ever, actually, ever. And I don't really get stage fright anymore, or nervous, that sort of thing. But every once in a while, I was a bit nervous before Glastonbury, for example, because it's a big thing, But I don't, I used to get really nervous when I started. When I was doing the little pubs and clubs, I was getting really nervous for those. But not for a very long time now. But yeah, they were definitely the biggest wobbles I've ever had. But it was great. It went really well. I really, really enjoyed it.
It felt like a triumph in the end.
It did, yeah. It felt, and the thing that was really lovely about it, I think the fans were very aware of what it meant to me, and a lot of them that were there had been there from the very beginning, and they were that the previous time I'd done Wembley, and so there was that's why it's called a perfect circle. It was this fantastic journey, from there, and this great big arc of getting worse and then getting better and getting really good and right back to there again. And it was just lovely to have a moment like that, which was genuinely felt as if you were sharing it, that other people were very aware, and many of them, if not most of them, had been on that journey with you. Their support had been integral to making that thing possible, to making that recovery possible, getting back to Wembley possible. That really added a huge amount of sort of emotional impact to it for me, I think. So it wasn't all just about me when I actually stood there. I went out there for the first time, I just looked out and everyone's going ballistic. And I knew, certainly most people down the front know them, and I knew that they were there at the beginning, and it was this shared moment of triumph. Yeah. I think they felt sort of vindicated in being a Gary Numan fan. It's not always been cool to be a Gary Numan fan. Many years ago, it was a laughable thing, and so for them to, they've had to endure all that as well, the ridicule and also relative about me at the store, whatever. And so the fact that they were able to be there and see that, be a part of that moment, as not just see it, but to be a part of it, was really, really special.
And you mentioned Glastonbury. This year you finally played Glastonbury. So why now? Why this year?
It was the first time they've invited me. I wanted to do it forever. Yeah. I think festivals are massively important for me, especially for someone like me, because I don't get a lot of radio play, very little radio play. So the only way you've really got to reach out to new people and to do, to keep sort of expanding the fan base and doing better is to be seen by people that wouldn't normally see you. And so festivals are a really important part of that. It's also why I've started doing these package tours, and I've done a couple with Ministry now in the US. I'm just about to start one with Psychedelic Furs on Friday. And that's exactly the same function. I will be seen, I am seen on these package tours by people that normally wouldn't come to see me. That's exactly what happens at festivals. Glastonbury in particular, because it's so massive and it gets televised and stuff. It's the way forward for someone like me. I don't release sort of commercial hit singles. I'm aware of that, so radio play is a problem. You're not going to get much radio play doing the sort of stuff that I do. And so you lose what is unarguably the most important promotional tool out there. You don't have access to that. And so festivals and these package tours expose me to new people. And it has an effect. I noticed on the two Ministry tours, for example, looking at my social media numbers, and they just start clicking up at a fantastic rate each night you're on that tour. And then you finish that tour and it sort of slows back down again. You go back to just doing your own thing, and the movement is slow, but on those tours, there's a massive surge of interest. The merch goes through the roof. It's just a really, really useful thing to do. And I think doing it live is a great way of doing it. I think playing live is, the primary requirement of any band, being able to play live. If you can then take what you do live and put it into a studio and capture that same energy, then brilliant. But I think being able to play live, being a good live band is absolutely essential. So it feels like the right way to build up a new audience. They're not from some clever TikTok campaign, but just going out there and fucking playing your songs in front of people and they like them or they don't. That feels genuine to me.
You mentioned you rebuilt your career in a way few artists ever do. What kept you going through the harder stretches?
I think the fact that I love doing it. There's a lot of people that get into music or various things because they want to be famous, but they just want to be famous. They're not particularly interested in the journey to get there. They're not particularly interested in the skills involved or learning their craft or whatever it might be. They just want to be famous. There's nothing wrong with that. That's not a criticism. But I think where it becomes a problem is when things don't go so well. If you don't make it quickly, or if you make it and then it all fades away again rather quickly, you end up slumming it a little bit. If you don't really love what you're doing because you was only about getting famous in the first place, you're going to really struggle in those moments, and I think that's where I've been lucky in that I genuinely love doing it. If I wasn't successful at it, I would do it for a hobby. If I didn't make any money from it, I would still do it as a hobby, probably just as much, if not more even, because I wouldn't have to go out and tour it. So I'd have more time at home making music and being in a band, doing little gigs and so on. So when it wasn't going so well, I just carried on doing something that I love doing anyway. So I got up, did the same thing. They didn't sell as much, and it was disappointing. But the fact is, I was still living the life that I wanted to live. I was still making music, which is what I want to do. I was still going out and doing my gigs, albeit to less people, which is what I want to do. I was still in the band, which is what I want to be, effectively. I still have that sort of life, even if you're successful or not. If you're a professional musician, you wake up in the morning and you choose your day. I get up when I want. I got up when I want when it wasn't going so well. I can look out and it's a sunny day, and I think, do you know what? Fuck it. I'm gonna go out today. I'm gonna go down the beach. I'm not gonna do any work. I very rarely do that, mind you, because I'm a bit of I've got a work ethic, but that freedom to choose is a really, really important thing. And I value that as a massively important part of my life, that most of my life has been able to choose the things that I want to do. I don't have to get up to go to work for somebody else's job. I don't have to join a rush hour in the morning and in the evenings to and fro. I don't answer to anybody. And that is a prize. That is a very important thing. And I think sometimes people aren't aware of just how amazing a thing that is. It's all about, I want to be number one. I want to be headlining. Do you know, the thing that also surprises me is how people are so hung up on being a headline act, where they are in the bill at a festival. I don't give a fuck where I am. I don't give a fuck. I don't mind if I'm first on or headlining. I don't care about any of that. But for some people, that's everything. They talk about, we're doing a headlining tour. Good for you. Good for you. Don't care. Some of these, I do Q&As on my Patreon thing. And one of the questions on the last Q&A was, why are you supporting psychedelic furs? You shouldn't be supporting. First of all, no, there is no hierarchy in this. It doesn't matter. Simple Minds supported me back in the day. OMD supported me back in the day. There was another time I supported OMD, and I would again. I don't care. I would support Simple Minds in the future. I don't care about any of that sort of thing. You're playing to people. That's what we get into this for. We shouldn't get into this to be the big one. If you become the big one, fucking great, lucky for you. That's brilliant. If that's what you want. But just love doing what you do. Love doing it. If you go out, if you're supporting another band and they're nice people, it's a really lovely experience. Those 2 ministry tours I did, I fucking loved them. We hung out with them every night. In fact, they were on our bus most of the time because our bus had a slide out. We had more room in it. Al Jorgensen's come on the bus, their band come on the bus. We're all really good mates. It was a really lovely atmosphere, and you just rolled across America, and I loved every minute of it. Didn't give a fuck who was top, who was middle, who was bottom. Didn't give a fuck. If we tour in Europe, in Britain with them ever again, then I would probably be the headline band. Al won't give a fuck. That's not what we're in it for. And so, anyway, sorry, get back to your question. When things weren't going so well, the only thing that was a problem with it was that I didn't have that much money, and I nearly lost my house, and it, I couldn't give my wife the things I wanted to give her. That was a problem side of it, just financial, really. From an ego point of view, it just doesn't bother me. I really want to be successful. So I'm not saying I don't have ambition. I really, really do. But I don't get my self-esteem from it. And I certainly don't do music just for that reason. It's not a means to an end. I love doing what I do. And if success comes along, then fantastic. That's really good. I used to call it the cherry on the cake. If you're just about getting the cherry, eating the cherry and ignoring the cake, then you've missed the whole point of what being in a band is all about. Being in a band is the cake. Success is a cherry on top. The cake is still fucking delicious, great. And if you spend your whole life just eating the cake and you never get to the cherry, you've had a really, really good life and you're well fed. The cake, the cherry on top, that's for your Michael Jacksons and your Oasis and those really massive, massive, massive people. And good luck to them. It's fantastic. But that should not be the reason. The cake is not a stepping stone. You know what I mean? It's an essential part of what most of us have for our lives as musicians.
Beyond Telekon and the live album, can you share any hints about your next studio project?
Yeah, it's totally devoted to the possible fallout of AI. So it's all to do with AI. But I don't want to look at AI as it is and just talk about what it can do and what it can't. I want to look at the human cost of what it could entail sometime from now, not next year, year after, sometime from now. More so, actually, what kind of world will be left to us when AI is ruling supreme? What kind of a world would AI create, and what's left for us? Is there anything left for us? So there's a number of different avenues to look at. Would we be left to fend for ourselves? And if so, I believe we would be barbaric and brutal. But I sort of did that with Savage a couple of albums back. That was what would happen if the global apocalypse blew up and we were left with this devastated planet. Much the same thing in a way. We become savage, which is why it was called Savage, and we kill each other, and we're just really fucking unpleasant. So I'm a little bit worried about that avenue, because that's not that with the AI projection, because that wouldn't be that dissimilar to Savage. I don't know if I could wrap it up in too many different ways. So it's trying to find an avenue that isn't what I've done before and comes from obviously from a very, very different place. Would AI care about global apocalypse? Would it care even? Would it even care about the planet? I hadn't even thought about that. Anyway, so it's going to be to do with the fallout of AI, and only when I start to write it really will I really know what shape that's going to take, and whether it sort of focuses on a particular avenue or whether it looks at different options or what might happen. That's possible. Don't really know yet. I actually did start it. I started it in December, January. Wrote a few things for it, and then Gemma got really sick, really unwell, and I just lost focus on it. It was just all about her and trying to get her fixed, and that's but yeah, it's been a really shit year to be fair on that side of it. She's just had this massive kidney thing. They haven't replaced a kidney; they've moved one. They took one out and put it in a different part of her body, because where it was getting crushed. Or the veins coming out of it were being crushed, and that was causing all sorts of problems and really, really painful and debilitating. So that's fixed now. But she had a mini stroke last year, a hole in the heart last year. She had a thing called SVT, where your heart suddenly goes mad. Like she had, we registered at one point 242 beats per minute on a heart. Fuck that, man. I can't even tap that fast, So her heart was going crazy, and then she started to get really high blood pressure. She's got this neck thing going on, what we're going to get fixed in December after the touring in London. So it's been a nightmare, actually, and I've not been on it as far as writing songs and thinking about, AI and stuff like that too much. But she's getting there. She's better. She had this kidney thing about 3 weeks ago, and they said it's a 4 to 6 week recovery for the externals, a little bit longer for the internals. When the Psychedelic Furs tour starts, is 4 weeks to the day. So we're pushing it a little bit, but we live on a bus, so she's going to come and she'll be on the bus, so she can still relax. Most of the days it's just hanging out on the bus, a little bit of music in the evenings that I do. She doesn't have to do it. So apart from doing my makeup and getting me my clothes for the day sorted out, which I can do anyway, she should be able to just relax and carry on recovery, and then sort of rejoin things as and when she feels up to it. So I think we'll be right. But that's the current one. She has a crumbling neck, or the joints in her neck, especially the upper neck, the bones are crumbling, and it's squeezing the spinal column. So she's getting shakes and things to do with the nerves and weird stuff going on. And so in December, when the Telekon tour finishes, we're going to stay in London. And then there's somebody there, a surgeon there in Harley Street, that does this operation where they take out 3 or 4 of the neck discs and replace them with artificial ones. It's a big deal. There's a 1 in 100 chance of being paralyzed. So it's not without its risks. But if that happens, then that gives her it frees off the neck pain, which is severe. Gives them mobility in the neck again because it's sort of stopped her from driving now. But the biggest thing that it does, it causes migraines every day. And the migraines are causing white spots on the brain. She has a thing called white matter disease on the brain now, which is this problem now beginning to join together because these daily migraines are adding significance to that. Sorry if I've told you all this before.
No, you haven't told me before. No.
So when we're in December, we're going to get that done. Hopefully the neck done, because the domino of that is that it cures the migraines and so on, and the white matter disease. And then when I get back from that, which will probably be January, then I'll start on a new album again. So it would have been a year gap between when I started it, when I'm going to get back to it. But hopefully I'll get that done fairly soon. I've got a head full of ideas for it. And then we'll start touring that towards the end of next year. And then probably for a year and a half or so after that, we just be touring that new record.
Will you use AI as a tool to write and record the album?
No, I wouldn't personally, because much as I think it does amazing things, it's not me. And I think that's the difference. If you're an artist, it has to come from you. And so, I understand the temptation that people have had and people are having in that they are using it and it's creating great stuff for them. But I don't understand that you can feel satisfied with that. It wasn't you. You gave some instructions to AI and AI created it, be it a picture, a photograph, a tune, a video, whatever it might be. It's not you. So you're no longer an artist. You're a programmer. It's not the way to do it. I don't think. Not for me. And the fact that there are other people are out there doing it, and it is making amazing stuff. I'll be the first to admit that it's beautiful and stunning, and I love looking at it. It's mostly artwork, video things that I've seen, but it's not for me. So as a consumer, I enjoy looking at it, and I'll probably enjoy listening to it when it comes along. But as an artist, I don't want to make my music with it. Or any artwork. When we get to do the artwork for the sleeve, I will not. And I don't want to sound like an old school purist. The car is a terrible invention; it's going to ruin humanity. I don't mean it like that. But for me, it's why I work alone primarily. Because as soon as you involve other people, if you're in a band and you all contribute to a song, then it wouldn't be mine. It wouldn't be mine. I've been accused in the past of being a control freak, and it's never been that. It's just that if there's something goes out that says this is a Gary Numan record, then it fucking has to be a Gary Numan record. Good or bad. It has to be mine. If I use AI, it's not mine, and I don't. Where's the satisfaction in that? I don't get any satisfaction from that. So I don't want it. I don't know how many more years I've got left doing this. I'm getting pretty old now, 68 next birthday. And I would like to have had a career which is entirely mine. Everything that I did come from my brain, from my thoughts, my experiences, And I think the thing that actually about AI that I didn't mention earlier was I suspect that for all of the enthusiasm there will be for it in the coming years, on all of the sort of acceptance of it, I suspect that at some point in the future, might be distant future, I really couldn't guess, but I believe that humans will at some point once again want things made by other humans, because that shared experience, that listening to someone that's been through what you're going through now, or dreams the same dreams that you have now, whatever it might be, I believe that is a need in human beings. I think we need to relate to other people, and that's what music has done to a very large degree for forever. It relates to what people are going through, and it becomes a shared experience. That will be lost with AI. AI will be a learned experience, and it will sound identical, but it won't be the same. And eventually, people will realize, or maybe not realize, they probably realize already, but they will yearn once again to speak to somebody or to listen to somebody that is actually sharing that real experience and writing about what they've gone through. So I think, again, perfect circle. It'll come back to never to what it is now, probably, but there will be there will be a return to some demand, albeit maybe a small one, but to human beings creating music that people search for. But like vinyl in a way. Yeah, vinyl
Yeah,
sort of.
yeah. People went from streaming and they're banning all the physical copies. Now
Yeah.
people are banning vinyl because it's just
My
so
kids love
tangible.
vinyl. Yeah, they really, you still download stuff, but vinyl is a real treat for them. 'Cause it's that experience, it's that experience of having something, opening something and seeing what people have written. It's, I don't know, there's something about it, which is an experience lost when you just download the stream or something. Doesn't have the immediacy or it's not as easy. Putting on a record, there is a ritual to it, isn't there? Putting it on and taking it out and all that, sitting there looking at the sleeve notes, and there's a ritual to it. But it made listening to music a minor event, which it stopped being, and it's a shame. So vinyl brings all that back. I love vinyl.
For someone who's never heard your music, what 5 songs would you want them to start with?
Oh, it's a good question. I suppose Cars would be one. Although in many ways I don't think it is typical of what I've done, but it certainly is a good example of a particular period of what I did. After Electric or Down in the Park would be another, but then I would probably move on to more recent things. I'm not sure. Something from Savage. I'm really bad at this, aren't I? I'm really bad at knowing what sort of represents what I do, really. There's a song called A Prayer for the Unborn, which is particularly important to me. I would definitely put that one in there. Probably nothing from the middle years at all, really. Oh, God. I thought I'd rattle out 5 instantly, but I can't now. I'm thinking of it.
Okay, well, what album would you point them to?
Savage. Savage or Splinter. Either of those two. Oh, some good stuff on Splinter, actually. Trouble is, I've done so much stuff, I actually forget my own stuff. I just forgot about Splinter. Yeah, no, Savage or Splinter, I think either one of those two will, if I was to point into an album, either one of those two would do, I think.
But you mentioned Cars and Our Friends Electric. Do they feel like the foundation of everything, or or do they just feel like a different lifetime?
Both, really. Definitely feels like a different lifetime. The person I was when I wrote them, the person I was when I was sort of working them, when they come out and doing all the TVs and things with them. But very sort of different person in many ways to the person I am now. I much prefer the person I am now to the person I was back then, because that person was, I don't know, just not damaged, but incomplete. A lot of the things that needed to be added to that person, I've added over the years, and I think I've become much better for it. Yeah, but they are a foundation of everything that I've done sort of since. Really, it's all built on the success of what those two things did, and creatively, that was sort of the very early days of me working with electronic music, which I've obviously stuck with ever since. So everything I've learned about making music and writing songs and production and so on sort of stems from not those two songs specifically, but that era, the era that they come from. I think the progress in Telekon to Pleasure Principle, I think is enormous. When I listen to it, I hear a huge amount of progress in Telekon that didn't exist on Pleasure Principle or the one before it. And that's, it's only a year later, 6 months later, whatever it was. So I was learning fast at the time. I remember I was sort of massively obsessed about music and learning how to write better and record better and what everything did in the studio. I wanted to know everything about everything, and I lived for it. I absolutely lived for it. So it is both things. It is definitely a foundation of everything that I've learned since. It all started from that era, but it absolutely seems like a different lifetime. So to the way I feel about it now. In many ways, even touring. When I was touring back then, I was so uncomfortable and so out of my depth, and didn't know what to do and what to do with my hands, and just fucking awkward. I remember a lot of the review. One review in particular said that I was very wooden on stage. That was meant to be an insult. I know, but it's absolutely true. I was. I had to learn how to be freer on stage and how to just move around and be less
I thought
aware.
that was part of your act then.
Well, I sort of made it a part of it. It wasn't. It was because I didn't really know what to do. It's one of the problems. I've sort of said many times that people that have a slower progression to success are much better prepared for it when it arrives. For people like me, where it comes very, very quickly, and early on in your career, it's much harder to deal with because you're not experienced. You haven't done many gigs. You haven't done many interviews. You barely know your way around a studio. You are still learning all of those things. But now you've got everybody watching, and people are so critical. I did Top of the Pops for the first time, and there are other people on there that have been famous for 20, 30 years plus, whatever it was. I can't remember now, but seasoned professionals, and you're beside them, and this is your one chance. And it's difficult. It's really, really difficult to stand out in that environment, or to be good enough, really. So that's the challenge, though, isn't it? That's the challenge. You want to break into this world. When you start it, you might be writing good songs, but you really don't know much about the business at all. You don't know what it's like to be on stage. Now, some people are just born to it. They're just natural. They get out on stage and they just come alive. But fantastic. I envy that, because that sure as fuck wasn't me. I practiced in my bedroom in front of a mirror pretty much every single move of my arm that I did for the whole show. I was standing right. I'm going to stand here now, and then I'm going to do that, and then I'm going to put my arm up there when I sing that song. Wooden. Fucking hell, I could have said way worse than that. And yet it worked because it was quirkily uncomfortable, quirkily awkward. It sort of worked because it was it was autism in motion. It was it, it was me what I was. That was what I was at the time. And then over the years, you do it more. You get more confident. You get less nervous. You you start to free up a little bit in the way you feel, and you start to be able to move to the music in an unconscious kind of way rather than planning every single move you're going to do. And after a while, it becomes more natural than eating dinner. So not born to it, but sort of grow into it. That's been my path through it. So I'm not a natural showman. I'm not a natural performer. I'm certainly not a natural celebrity. But you can learn how to do these things over time, so you become a pretty reasonable version of it. That's just entirely separate to songmaking of it, to songwriting. Obviously, that's a different skill.
If you could reassure the 23-year-old Gary who walked off stage in 1981, what would you tell him?
I'll probably say to me, it's gonna be all right. But there's not much. You see, I really do believe that the experiences and the difficulties that you have, the skills that you have, the experiences, or the setbacks, all of those things, you are shaped by these moments. You are shaped by these things. It colours very much the person that you become. And so if you like the person that you've become, and I do, I like who I am now, it would be a very, very sort of dangerous thing to go back and start changing any of that, So in a way, if I had to live my life again, I wouldn't live it again with the experience and the wisdom that I have now. I would be where I was again then, and you would have to make those same mistakes and experiences those same awkward moments to become we. If I could live it all again as I am now, then fuck, I could do a better job. I could do such a better job of it than I did back then. You know, I'll be doing 10 nights at Wembley Stadium. Do you know what I mean? Like, I would fucking have handled it so well. I'd know how to deal with people and everyone. You know, I'll be relaxed and calm and friendly and just so different, so different. But that's
That's
yeah,
not the way it was supposed to be.
not the way it's supposed to be. You know, all you can hope for is that you sort of have this sort of life with all of the ups and downs that it's had, and that you come out at the end of it a decent person. You know, not bitter and twisted, not feeling like the world owes you a living. You know, not feeling like you're some undiscovered genius. None of that bollocks. You know, that you come out of it a decent human being with fucking good values, with a good work ethic, that loves their family and looks after their kids, and you know, looks after the people that work for you, create a nice, happy environment for everybody to work in. You know, my band's been with me 25 plus years. You know, so we're friends first and foremost, and I take care of them first and foremost. You know, the music is secondary in a way. That, you know, you're going to go out on tour and you're going to have the best time. If anyone makes a mistake, doesn't matter. I'll make more than anyone. You know, that's what it's about. It's a live environment. Things are going to happen. You know, I know everyone's very good. I know everyone's very conscientious. I know if there is a mistake, it won't be deliberate. It won't be through laziness. It'll just be a mistake. These things happen. I sometimes get on stage, you know, especially when the tour's been going on for a bit, and you know, you're doing that same song that you've done a few times before, and your mind just starts to wonder. You know, I'm thinking, I remember when I was touring Ministry, we had this toaster on the bus with this like fat bread. I used to really look forward to getting up back on the bus and doing my toast. Yeah, I remember doing Cars one night, just thinking about looking forward to my toast, and forgetting where I was. Totally forgot where I was in the song and fucked it up completely. You know, so I'm doing shit like that all the time, so they're more entitled to make a few mistakes. The same thing with the crew. You know, if something's not quite ready in time, you got to get your guitar and it's not quite ready. Who cares? Do you know what I mean? It's just, you know, we're all in this together, and we're all going to get on, and we're all going to we'll hang out together. You know, every time we do a tour, my Gemma looks for local things to do in the areas, and we gather everybody up and say, look, we're going to go to this Mount Rushmore or wherever it might be, and the other bands, you know. So I'm going to pay for everything, right? Let's just all go and hang out. It'd be great on a day off. So you try to make it a really lovely experience. You know, it's meant to be an enjoyable thing. This, you know, it's not meant to be all stress and worry and ego and you know, if you're not fucking enjoying it, it's hard. It's hard enough when you do enjoy it, you know, but no, if you didn't enjoy it, Jesus Christ. Yeah. No, it's got to be fun, man. It's got to be fun.
We'll end it on that, Gary. Thank you very much.
No, my pleasure.
I'm looking forward to seeing you in Belfast. So there's plenty of places you can go in Belfast whenever you're here.
I'm glad they got added actually, because I was a bit miffed that we didn't have any Irish shows in it. You know, why not? And so, oh, we couldn't get the venues. Oh,
Yeah,
good.
It'll be good. Can't wait.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Okay,
All right,
well,
man.
thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
My pleasure. I'll see you again.
Have a good day, Gary.
Thank you. Bye bye, man. Bye bye.
Bye.